That's why we are here today to call on Congress to protect public media and to reject the politically motivated attack.
Public radio supporters gather in front of NPR's headquarters as House and Senate Republicans introduce legislation to defund the pubcaster, while some member stations receive FCC inquiries. Democrats propose legislation to reel in Chairman Carr. FCC looking at alternative methods for GPS. DOJ announces big binational bust in so-called Grandparent scam. And the Grassroots Radio Conference is heading west. All of that and more coming up.
REC, FCC Today, Michi Bradley.
Bringing the Daily Digest to life, this is FCC Today, the podcast for March 10, 2025.
Protect public media! Protect public media!
On Thursday, there was a small demonstration in front of the National Public Radio headquarters at L Street and Capitol in D.C., just down the street from the FCC headquarters. The demonstration, a part of Protect My Public Media Day, was conducted by progressive political organization Our Revolution, along with the American Civil Liberties Union, NABET CWA, and Free Press, along with Big Bird, Elmo, and the Count from Sesame Street, gathered to show their support for public media, oppose Carr's inquiry into NPR's underwriting practices, and to protest the recently introduced Defund NPR Act. Courtesy of WJLA-TV, here's Joseph Javargis, Executive Director of the organization Our Revolution.
In the coming months, our coalition is going to organize and mobilize and pressure every elected official to protect public broadcasting, not just for journalists, not just for broadcast workers, not just for listeners, but for our democracy. That's right. We are not going to stand idly by as this regime silences the press, defunds public media, and turns America into a nation of disinformation and lies.
Here's Craig Aaron, co-CEO of Free Press.
It's no wonder that Donald Trump hates public media. It's no wonder that Elon Musk hates public media. They attack the media. They squeeze the media. They starve the media. They weaponize the government against the media. They don't want democracy. We're standing right here, just down the street. That's the Federal Communications Commission. And the guy Donald Trump put in charge of the Federal Communications Commission is named Brendan Carr. And I like to call him Brendan Carr, the censorship czar. Because Brendan Carr, the censorship czar, is weaponizing the FCC against free speech. In the United States, we spend less than $2 per capita to fund public media. And the rest of the world looks at us and they're so confused. Because in the rest of the world, they spend 20 or 50 or 100 times as much on public media. And it's incredibly popular. It's a source of national pride. Our problem here is not that we spend too much money on public media. Our problem here is that we spend too much money on billionaires.
And finally, Jenna Leventoff from the American Civil Liberties Union.
In the very first amendment to our nation's Constitution, our forefathers promised that Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or the press. The reason that this is one of the first things that our founding fathers chose to protect is clear. As Chief Justice Brandeis said in a little law nerdy moment, and in far more eloquent but long-winded words than I'm saying to you today, only in a society that enables freedom of thought and freedom of speech can a stable government survive. In the Commission's own words, the FCC does not, cannot, and will not act as a self-appointed, free-roving arbiter of truth in journalism.
We have a link to the full WJLA coverage in our YouTube description. Republican Representative Kat Cammack of Florida and Senator Jim Banks of Indiana have introduced the Defund NPR Act. According to the bill's text, the legislation states that no federal funds, directly or indirectly, be made available to support national public radio, including through the payment of dues or through the purchase of programming from the organization by a public broadcast station using federal funds received by the station. PBS was not mentioned in this legislation. Semaphore is reporting that Democratic Senators Ben Ray Lujan of New Mexico, Jackie Rosen of Nevada, and Ed Markey of Massachusetts will be introducing the Broadcast Freedom and Independence Act. According to the bill text that was provided to Semaphore, the legislation would prohibit the FCC from using the threat of investigation to force broadcasters to comply with the will of the president, preventing the president from firing commissioners at will, and not consider political viewpoints as part of its approval over mergers. This comes in the wake of incidents such as the recent letters of inquiry that were sent to Comcast, NBC Universal, and to Verizon regarding their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, as well as the news distortion issue raised against CBS in conjunction with their parent company Paramount's merger with Skydance. House Democrats, led by Doris Matsui of California, plan to introduce a similar bill. It is extremely unlikely that this legislation will pass in the Republican-controlled Congress. Ars Technica is reporting that the White House is making changes to the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, or BEAD program. The program, approved by Congress in 2021 and administered by the NTIA, allocates $42.45 billion to expand high-speed internet through funding planning, infrastructure deployment, and adoption programs. All 50 states, the District of Columbia, and 5 territories participating in BEAD have an approved Internet for All plan. In a statement by Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, he said that, quote, because of the prior administration's woke mandates, favoritism towards certain technologies, and burdensome regulations, the program has not connected a single person to the internet and is in dire need of a readjustment, end quote. These changes call for a policy that is transport neutral by eliminating a preference for fiber and the potential for other changes, such as a request by Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, who wants to kill a requirement that ISPs receiving construction subsidies should not be required to provide reduced rate services to low-income subscribers. He also criticized what he calls, quote, unionized workforce and DEI labor requirements, climate change assessments, excessive per-location costs, and other central planning mandates, end quote. Critics say that this change to transport neutral could result in a shift in funding to satellite internet providers, such as Elon Musk's Starlink. On Thursday, FCC Commissioner Ana Gomez issued a statement about these changes, saying, quote, Congress established the BEAD program to ensure everyone everywhere has access to high-quality broadband with affordability as a top priority. She goes on to state that the need for these policies is more urgent now with the end of the Affordable Connectivity Program. She stated that we must remain committed to prioritizing affordability and equal access. In a play on the acronym, she said that BEAD, B-E-A-D, without equality is just bad, B-A-D. Hey, it's the Michi. Our government and the communications industry in general is loaded with acronyms and buzzwords. It's not just an acronym soup, it's the entire soup factory. While we introduce acronyms in our reporting, and sometimes they become more commonplace going forward, and then we just don't introduce them again. To keep up with the acronyms that we use on the podcast and through the REC Network's universe, please visit recnet.com/acronyms. That's recnet.com/acronyms. If you are getting this podcast through the Michelle Bradley YouTube channel, please take this moment right now to put a like on this video, and please subscribe to keep getting our content. We got at least 12 likes on that last video, on that last podcast, and that does help a lot. Thank you for your support. The Associated Press reports on Thursday that a second federal judge has extended a block barring the Trump administration from freezing federal grants, which could include funding for the Next Generation Warning System for public radio stations. In Rhode Island, U.S. District Court Judge John McConnell granted the preliminary injunction to the suit filed by nearly 24 states. In the ruling, the judge stated that the White House was trying to put itself above Congress, and by doing so would undermine the distinct constitutional roles of each branch of government. This is the second court to take action against the freezing of grants and loans. In the original case out of the D.C. Circuit Court, the White House responded by rescinding an OPM memorandum, which the White House press secretary stated on X was not a rescission of the federal funding freeze. In the original case, U.S. District Judge Lauren Ali Khan issued a preliminary injunction to further extend the original judgment on February 25th. As previously reported, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting sent an advisory to NGWS recipients to stop work due to the uncertainty of the situation. There has been no recent updates to this advice. REC Networks has received third-party reports that some larger member stations of National Public Radio have received letters of inquiry from the FCC Enforcement Bureau. These LOIs are reported to request information from the public broadcasters regarding their underwriting acknowledgement announcements. This is apparently part of Chairman Carr's investigation of NPR and PBS into the content of non-commercial underwriting acknowledgement announcements. REC has not seen the actual content of the LOI.
The Grassroots Radio Conference.
The steering committee of the Grassroots Radio Conference has announced that the 2025 GRC will be held in Spokane, Washington, hosted by Thin Air Community Radio, licensee of KYRS Medical Lake, Washington. Spokane was one of 3 potential sites considered. Other potential candidates included Jonesboro, Arkansas, proposed by KLEKLP, and Omaha, Nebraska, proposed by KOWNLP. In a public host selection survey, KYRS received nearly 47% of the vote, while the remainder of the votes were split between the 2 other candidates. This will be the first time since 2018 that the conference has been held in the western United States, as well as the first time since 2018 that it's been hosted by a full-service station. The dates of the conference will be announced by KYRS at a later time. The FCC has announced the agenda for the next open meeting scheduled for Thursday, March 27. The FCC will consider a further notice of proposed rulemaking in PS dockets 21-479 and 13-75 to make improvements to Next Generation 911. Next Generation 911, or NG 911, is an internet protocol method of routing and delivering calls for service, replacing legacy methods. The FCC will consider a 6th further notice of proposed rulemaking in PS docket 07-114, a proceeding to help improve the identification of the location of a wireless caller to 911. The proposal would change how wireless providers deliver the Z-axis information to 911 call centers. The Z-axis refers to the phone's vertical height at the time of the call. This may be helpful in cases where 911 calls are made from multi-story buildings. It also seeks comments on improving accuracy of the horizontal location and for other purposes. The FCC will consider a notice of inquiry in WT docket 25-110, which looks at promoting the development of positioning, navigation, and timing, or PNT technologies and solutions. The PNT proceeding is to evaluate potential complementary or alternative technologies to global positioning satellites. This includes several terrestrial technologies, including the use of the NextNav system, which operates in the 920 to 928 megahertz band. The NextNav system has received a lot of opposition, especially from the amateur radio community. The NOI also looks at eLORAN technology. eLORAN is a terrestrial radio navigation and timing system that works in the 90 to 110 kilohertz band and is used mainly in maritime and aviation. While Congress has allowed the original LORAN system to terminate rather than upgrading to eLORAN, there has been interest in reviving eLORAN as a potential alternative to GPS. Another technology being looked at is the Broadcast Positioning System, or BPS. BPS would use existing television broadcast stations operating with the ATSC-3 next-gen television standard to provide timing information within the broadcast TV spectrum. According to a white paper released by the National Association of Broadcasters, a field test conducted at WUHT-TV in Washington, D.C. has demonstrated an accuracy of 40 nanoseconds across 10 kilometers of dense urban terrain can be achieved. We expect that BPS will be a very hot topic at the NAB show this April in Las Vegas.
Michi Bradley. Michi at NAB.
Every year I try to depart the rural tranquility of Riverton to attend the Grassroots Radio Conference and the NAB show in Las Vegas. For me, attending GRC allows me to help provide assistance to smaller broadcasters and to get to know them better, as well as listen to their concerns, which helps out the REC National Advocacy. Attending NAB helps me stay on top of new technologies, both in the spectrum and in the studio, as well as to be able to network with others who share my passion for keeping radio relevant. Unfortunately, due to family medical issues, I was not able to attend the 2024 Grassroots Radio Conference in New Orleans. Barring any setbacks, I am still planning on attending NAB, which will be held from April 5th through April 9th at the Las Vegas Convention Center. Radio broadcasting will be mainly in the West Hall of the Convention Center. Every year, I designate a home base, which is one booth that I tend to frequent or be within close proximity if I'm not somewhere else. This means if you want your opportunity to catch up with the Michi, the home base is the best starting point. This year, I am designating my home base as our friends at AIR, which provide plug-and-play station websites, mobile apps, and the Playout One radio automation system. AIR has previously announced that they'll be unveiling some enhancements to Playout One at this year's NAB. AIR will be located in the very northeast portion of the West Hall at booth W1167. So no matter how big or small your station is, please give AIR a visit. If you can't wait or you can't make the show, check out their website at AIIR.com. This podcast is not sponsored by AIR. This is only my endorsement and testimonial as a user of AIR's products and services. ABC and NPR are reporting that House Republicans have introduced a short-term continuing resolution to keep the government open after March 14. While President Trump has posted on Truth Social for all Republicans to vote for the bill, there is still a small amount of resistance among House Republicans, which could threaten the slim majority that the party has. House Democrats do not seem to be supportive of this legislation, which will make this a challenge for passage. Even if the legislation passes the House, it would still need to go through the Senate, where the bill would need at least 7 Democrats to vote in favor in order to meet the 60-vote majority. Not all Senate Republicans are on board, though. Senator Rand Paul, Republican from Kentucky, has already vowed to vote against the legislation, thus increasing the need for bipartisan support. As we've experienced in past government shutdowns, it is very likely that after the March 14 deadline, agencies may continue to operate if they continue to have any previous funding. If the FCC does fully close, these will be considered non-business days and could lead to the loss of some or all systems. Stay tuned to fcc.today, the website, for daily releases from the agency regarding their operating status. REC has updated our shutdown information page, which includes details on how REC will operate in the event of a shutdown and a full systems loss. Visit recnet.com/shutdown. On Friday, the FCC released a consumer advisory regarding what is known as the Grandparent scam. The scam involves robocalls targeting seniors that route to a call center. Once the victim reaches the call center, they are advised that their relative, usually a grandchild, has been arrested and needs money for bail. Elderly victims were often told that because there was a gag order, they could not discuss it with others. Elderly victims were convinced to provide bail money to an individual falsely posing as a bail bondsman who would come to the elderly victim's home to collect the money. The money would be later transmitted internationally, sometimes involving cryptocurrency. The FCC advisory was prompted by a case in Vermont where the U.S. Attorney for the District of Vermont had announced that on February 20, 2025, a federal grand jury reached an indictment charging 25 Canadian nationals with participation in a grandparent scam. All but 2 were arrested in Canada last Tuesday. 5 of the defendants who actually operated the call center also face charges of conspiring to commit money laundering. Those 5 defendants can face up to 40 years in prison, while the others could face up to 20 years behind bars. Prior to this indictment, an additional 9 individuals located in Miami, Los Angeles, New York, Quebec, and in China had been previously charged in the District of Vermont in connection with this grandparent scam. The DOJ reminds the public that they can report cases of elder fraud by calling 833-FRAUD-11. That's 833-FRAUD-11.
Michi Bradley.
FCC Today, the podcast, is available through Podbean, iHeart, Odyssey, Apple, TuneIn, and other podcast providers. It's also available at the Michelle Bradley YouTube channel. If you're listening there, please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Keep up to the minute with everything going on in the Media Bureau and at the rest of the FCC by visiting the website, fcc.today. For help with FM, LPFM, or FM translators, contact REC Networks at 202-621-2355. Some of this week's material was provided by WJLA-TV in Washington, D.C. under fair use. REC Networks is a leading advocate for a diverse dial and keeping radio relevant. For more information, visit recnet.com. If you have any comments about this week's podcast or other things that are on your mind, call our input line at 202-963-0852. We may play your comments on the next podcast. That's 202-963-0852. For now, I'm Michelle Bradley, SBE Certified Broadcast Technologist. Thank you for listening.